for coming out this afternoon for this gracious tribute to Jason. It's been a really rough struggle for him, making, down through this path he had to follow. We certainly appreciate all the support that we've had from the family, our friends, and the community. It's just been great. Can't say enough about it. Okay, I want to also, tell how much we appreciate Michelle, Jared, and Scott Leach and them who went down and spent time with Jason at MD Anderson in Houston. He had to have somebody there with him, during the time of treatment and going through the treatments, which were pretty
intense.
Painful and horrendous at times. I want to thank Shauna for putting everything together here for our gathering. It's just it's really a great to see how everything is set up and flowing and going. That it was a little over 2 years ago that we got the diagnosis
Pinch yourself.
They said he had mantle cell lymphoma. On top of that, a P53 variation. And the doctor sat there and just flat told us, we don't know of any cure. And, I really felt for Jason standing there, getting that kind of information. But they did say that MD Anderson was working on some things that would hopefully, maybe there was a button to push. And so we went through that gyration. We had a hard time getting him to MD Anderson because of insurance coverage, et cetera. But we finally did that, and were able to make that happen. And we just, I guess I got lulled in the feeling, just the way the things were going. I said, wow, they're going to keep finding the right button to push, And well, unfortunately, it didn't. And it got. Last in July, last week of July, the wheel fell off. And, but all this time, Jason was eligible for disability. He never wanted anybody to know that he was, what his condition was. He kept working, he kept forging away, and when he could have just kicked back and enjoyed life, and went out and got a new old pickup truck, which he wanted, and get around the countryside. But the sad part is the fact that in those 2 years, because of the treatments, because of the conditions they put in front of him, his immune system was gone, so he couldn't get around people. So he was in isolation for 2 years. So it was really, a situation where, that he couldn't enjoy life, those last couple of years. But he continued to make the best of it, and and just kept forging ahead too, because he's very cautious, because he wanted to do whatever needed to be done in order to prevent something to set in that was contagious that they could combat as well, or have to combat as well. And so is it the last week of July, the wheels fall off. They said, MD Anderson had said, well, we can't do anymore. And it took Jared and he 3 days to come from Houston because he was in such pain and that they'd have to stop. And he was also delirious. And so they had to go through that struggle. But the thing with it is that, well, he finally, and just think it was that Friday night, he's sitting on the steps. He had to stay in the RV at the plant, so because they had an isolated place to stay, we had it hygienically clean, etc. But at that juncture, he said something to me. We didn't know what the prognosis was at that time. We had not been told by MD Anderson that they had given up. But I think Jason knew, because I was sitting on the steps with him that night, and he said, well, I think they're giving up, Dad. And I didn't catch, it didn't sink in, but it was the case. Things sunk in, that there was not much hope, wasn't any hope left, that we were at the, let, I guess you'd say, nature take its course. But again, she's gonna be sorely missed. And but we'll have to, life goes on. Just have to be able to step, put one foot before the other, and then keep moving forward. So anyways, thanks again for everybody being here. It's very gratifying to see such a turnout and the cross section we do have, and the acknowledgement and the tribute to Jason, this afternoon. Having said all that, I'd like to have Cliff Crockett come forward, please, as Reverend Cliff. Oh. Whoa!
Is he hiding?
He's being a little obscure. Yeah, but you know who, Cliff, I don't know that it can be done. But anyways, have Cliff come up and say a few things in regards to which Jason would have wanted. You can see his Bible sitting over. Pack that back that table, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Isn't that nice that he asks me to come and speak and insults me before I get up to speak? We've known each other for 25 plus years now, so I guess you can do that. Some of you are sitting there saying, oh my gosh, he's going to preach. Yes, I am. I've been asked to do this, and I'm honored to do it. I am privileged to do it. I had an opportunity to get to know Jason not real well, but had a lot of conversations and a lot of memories of those conversations. So I'm just going to launch in because we're going to give you all an opportunity here after I get done and a little other stuff goes on. We're going to give those of you that want to share some memories to get up. I'd ask you to be brief when you do so, but we want to have you all tell something. And one thing that I think Jason would definitely say, don't get maudlin, don't get morbid. This is a celebration. So what I would say that if he did in your presence, and I'm sure he did, anything really dumb and embarrassing, we want to hear it now, okay? We want to hear it. I want to read to you from Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he watches over Israel and will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, now and forevermore. There's a fellow who was by the name of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Perhaps some of you read some of his poetry when you were in school. Maybe some of you remember. The words that he wrote about some of his poems, Paul Revere's Ride, the Song of Hiawatha. Maybe some of you remember that. But he wrote one particular poem on a Christmas day in 1861. And the reason for this poem was that on the July before that, his wife Fanny had been putting together a little memory envelope of their daughter's hair lock, and she was sealing it with a candle. The wind blew the candle over, caught Fanny's dress on fire, and she died. Longfellow tried to save her and was severely burned himself trying to save her. The same year the Civil War was tearing the country in two, his youngest son, Charles, joined the Union forces. The following year, he wrote on Christmas, "I can make no record of these days. Better to leave them wrapped in silence. Perhaps someday God will grant me peace." Some of you here today can resonate with those feelings. You can resonate with Longfellow's emptiness and despair, his doubts, his uncertainties. Christmas, Thanksgiving, every other holiday, and actually every other regular day from this point on will be different. That is unavoidable. But with this in mind, you can imagine how Longfellow felt when he heard that his son had been wounded in the war. And by Christmas 1864, the country had been at war now for 3 years. Thousands of lives have been lost. And the great poet sat down to write a poem that began that day that said, "I heard the bells on Christmas Day." And that poem that we've made into a Christmas carol was actually a poem written out of despair and agony and sorrow and loss and emptiness. It has made its way into a lot of our church hymnals, and we sing it. Some of us are old enough to remember hearing Perry Como and Frank Sinatra sing it. And it speaks of joyful things, of speaking of bells as a reminder of peace. And I know it's an odd quote for me to bring up a Christmas carol at a memorial service in the middle of fall. But bear with me for just a moment. Those words go something like this. "I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat, of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And thought how, as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rolled along the unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill toward men, till ringing, singing on its way, the world revolved from night to day, a voice, a chime, a chant sublime, a peace on earth, goodwill to men." And that all sounds very joyous and comforting, but his heart was not that light. The words began to change. His broken heart for his country and, moreover, the loss of his loved ones became very dark and heavy. He wrote, "Then from each black, accursed mouth, the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound the carols drowned of peace on earth and goodwill toward man. It was as if an earthquake rent the hearthstones of the continent and made forth the households born of peace on earth, goodwill to man. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Christmas, and again every day, reality seems to mock the talk of peace or joy, even family harmony. Longfellow had good reason to wonder whether or not there could be peace on earth, to wonder if there could even be peace in his own family. But he didn't stop with that. He wrote these final words: "Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail. With peace on earth, goodwill to man." You may be wondering, this isn't Christmas. Why use this hymn? Well, simply, I believe it's written by a husband, a father, a parent whose heart was broken, decimated by the loss of a loved one. The abject emptiness and hopelessness that he was feeling. Again, somewhat what I'm sure many of you have felt in these last few weeks as we have led up to this time. As you consider the loss of a son, a brother, a family member, a friend. This is why I think these words speak so profoundly, to me at least. Again, Longfellow said, God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The psalmist again confirms, he who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And although we may have good reason to be sad, that sadness, I don't believe, should paralyze us. Though it may appear that God is asleep, or has abandoned us, or is unconcerned, I promise you, he hasn't, and he won't. The Israelites waited through centuries of captivity for their Messiah. And in the fullness of time, St. Paul says to us, but when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that they might receive adoption as children of God. This is the hope that brings us here today. And it was so good to listen. And it's almost sad for me to be the only voice speaking right now, because you all, as you walked in, I was here early, and the cacophony of all the voices as you greeted one another and talked with one another said volumes about who Jason Schulz was, that he was someone who could bring you all together, not only to sorrow, but to rejoice and to enjoy being together. You see, the God who neither slumbers nor sleeps has sent his one and only Son, Jesus Christ, into the darkened world, into our darkened and heavy hearts, to tell us that although all of what has gone on seemed to lead to hopelessness and futility, we can come as a people of hope and promise. A hope that rings out like those bells, that Jason's life was worth something, that it made a difference. And the fact that you all are here says something about that. I had the opportunity to talk with Jason several times at church. And he, like most of us, when he came to church, had his chosen seat in our particular sanctuary. He would sit to the right side of the pulpit, about halfway up toward the balcony. He sat on the first row, or the first chair there, again, about 7 rows, 8 rows up. He would sit down. He wore his mask all the time, as you probably knew. And people would come by, lean over, shake his hand, talk to him, and I could watch it, and I could see that material of the mask would kind of crinkle as he was smiling. And his eyes just glowed as he talked with the people that were coming around him. And even in those latter days, that smile never dimmed. That smile never dimmed. I'm told that in school, in college, in his fraternity, at work, Jason was one of the, if you will, good guys. He had an affable personality, contagious laugh that you were drawn to. His love of sports. He was a good student. Someone we might call now a tech nerd.
Yes.
Although we say that fun, but little did I understood being a tech nerd.
He was a geek.
As mentioned in his obituary, he could build, disassemble, and rebuild almost anything. And I'm not surprised about this, considering his mom and dad. To quote a recent commercial, Jason had good genes. And in visiting with him, you could tell immediately that his mind never stopped. Again, that's why he was so good at what he did. He was also known for his adventurous spirit, one that I think borders on crazy, but that was his. Rock climbing, spelunking, skiing, snowboarding, even in his technological work. Anything that tested him, pushed him, and made him move just one square forward. Jason met life head on. He attacked it. This is why I'm sure what made him a pleasure to be around. And even in these latter days, he kept meeting life head on as all the procedures went on. He kept pushing. And I'd also say today that he even taught us all how to meet death head on. In visiting with him, even when you could tell that he was weakening and struggling, he managed to smile and a kind word. He and I talked about the battle that he was waging. We talked about his faith and his trust in God. We talked about the assurance that God was a source of strength and comfort for him. He was confident through his faith and his belief in Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, that whatever the outcome, God had covered him in his grace. Again, as the psalmist said, the Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on the right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. As the Apostle Paul claims in Romans 8, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Who then is the one who condemns? No one. Christ Jesus, who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is interceding for us. Who shall separate us? Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble, or hardship, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who has loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither present or the future, nor any powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. How can this be? Because the God who created everything, including Jason, never slumbers or sleeps, never takes his eye off of us. Even now, because of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we come with undaunted hope and promise that Jason rejoices now before his heavenly Father. And through faith in Jesus, we too can see his smile, see that glint in his eye, hear his gentle voice and his contagious laughter again. A couple weeks ago, I leaned over a dear friend of mine as she lay in her hospital bed in a coma. And I whispered in her ear, I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying by God's grace, I'll see you later. Jason, we say goodbye, dear friend, for now. But by God's grace in Jesus Christ, we'll see you later. May God add his richest blessing to these words. Amen and amen. I believe that we have a song that is going to be now.
Magic, run I'm telling you, that's a bit of a surprise for me.
Was it?
Yeah.
Never heard reggae music. I know what calypso is.
He loved all music, but I didn't know he got so much into reggae.
He said that. I hope you tell that story about the lights in the.
Yes, ma'am.
You promised me that.
I promise you.
Okay.
I only break my promises about half the time.
That was a song that Jason specifically requested that we play. And now I'm a little bit mad at him for it. Because now I'm supposed to speak. He had an app on his phone to basically close caption our conversations. And every time I spoke, it just said bird noises. So he would tell me to eat this microphone, which I am struggling with. All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today to honor the life of Jason and to celebrate the countless ways he enriched our lives. For those who may not know me, my name is Michelle, and I'm Jason's sister. Looking around this room, seeing so many people that held a special place in his heart, I know Jay would have hated to miss this. Today we gather not just to mourn Jason's passing, but also to celebrate the extraordinary ways he touched each of our lives. There are many words that define Jason, but none capture him completely. He was devout. His faith was not just a belief, but a daily practice. Reading his Bible, living his values, and loving fiercely. Even if you had not spoken in a while, he would greet you with joy, ready to help in any way that he could. After the Joplin tornado, he opened his home to a family in need, never hesitating to put others first. Jason was stoic. He endured pain and hardship without complaint, never wanting to burden anyone with his struggles. Many didn't even know that he was sick, because he always put others first and kept his sense of humor, which was his shield and his gift. I was lucky enough, thanks to Mom and Dad, and my really generous work, to spend significant time with him in Texas, where the nurses quickly learned that if Jason ever stopped joking or lost his manners, something was really wrong. There was one specific nurse who spoke Tagalog, and Jason, ever the mischief maker, asked how he would call himself a pain in the butt. For those wondering, it's Saket Sapwet. He thought that should be his new nickname. She thought that was terrible. Months after this conversation, he had a really rough night. And the next day she's pointing at items in the room for him to identify, and she pointed at this ancient television. And he got that lopsided signature grin of his and just said, crappy. The nurse looked completely confused while I burst out laughing. He wasn't up to explaining, so I relayed our earlier failed attempts to hook up all of his technology-loving equipment to this relic of a TV that had zero useful ports. She was impressed that he made the connection and got his joke. I met his goofy smile with his own. She muttered, "Saket sapwet." I'm sure some of you can imagine the way he giggled at that response. Jason was fastidious. He seemed offended the first time I called him that, so I told him to look it up. Fastidious means very attentive to and concerned about accuracy and detail. After reading that definition and a thoughtful pause, he just nodded and chuckled and said, fair enough. For Jason, being attentive to detail wasn't just a trait, it was a way of life. When making a purchase, he would research every possible derivation and determined what make and model was best for every intended purpose and possible scenario before making a selection for himself. Deciding on the right method to repair a chimney, that thing will now outlast an earthquake. If Jason picked something, you knew it would last. His curiosity and ingenuity started early. In elementary school, he had this Radio Shack 150-in-1 electronic project kit that he would use creating all sorts of clever contraptions. He wired up the laundry room so we could listen to the audio of Dukes of Hazzard and MacGyver, for those of you old enough to remember those shows. So we could sit in there and listen when we weren't supposed to watch TV. He even rigged up an alarm system to keep Jared out of his things. All before most kids could tie their shoes. Mom once let Jason borrow her serger sewing machine. Yes, he really could do anything. He was probably using it to make some cool outdoorsy contraption that he had designed. But for those unfamiliar, a serger is a complicated beast. It simultaneously cuts the edges and uses 4 spools of thread to finish a seam. And he made a few test passes, and then he did what I'm sure a lot of you have seen him do before. He paused, took a step back, put his hand on his chin, and stared at it. And he thought, and he tinkered, and he tested, he stopped. And then, with a confidence only he possessed, knowing he could fix anything, he proceeded to disassemble the entire thing. I think Mom was debating between killing him and having a heart attack.
Killing him.
But as always, Jason worked his magic. He put it back together, and it ran better than ever. Jason was welcoming. He would invite anyone to anything. For example, he invited his kid sister to go along to his Boy Scout troop's rappelling trip in high school. In hindsight, that must have been super awkward, but he never made me feel that way. That was just Jason, always including others, always making them feel at home. Right behind this building is the Monette Sled Hill. For those that aren't from here, it's awesome. You should absolutely do it. But Jason's Boy Scout troop is who built the steps into that hill so we could walk back up it. That was Jason, leaving his mark on the world in quiet, lasting ways. Jason loved being an uncle. Dang it, I can't look at you guys.
Get it together.
He once mailed our daughter a big box of coins. Pennies, nickels, dimes. She spent hours sorting it, counting it, adding it. It was a genius gift for a 5-year-old. I highly recommend it. It must have cost him far more to ship than the amount that it contained. But I can just imagine his grin when he came up with the idea and was boxing it up and just thinking, worth it. I have videos of him teaching our daughter to drive a forklift at the plant and reading stories to her when she was little. Memories we will always treasure. There's a quote I think we might all be feeling today. It's often incorrectly attributed to the author of Winnie the Pooh. And I think Jason would have appreciated both the sentiment of gratitude and the debate about the source. How lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard? Jay and I would tell each other corny jokes as a means of checking in on each other. The cornier, the better. So I'm checking in on all of you, the ones he loved, in the way he would have wanted. The last joke he sent me. How do you tell the gender of an ant? Drop it in water. If it sinks, girl ant. If it floats, boy ant. Jason would want us to remember the laughter, the good times, his impish grin, and his contagious chuckle. I called it his goblin giggle. So let's do just that. I invite each of you, family, friends, everyone whose life Jason touched, to share your favorite Jay stories, and let's remember the very best of him together. Thank you.
So I get the pleasure and privilege to tell some stories about Jason. My name is Jeff Wilson. I am a fraternity member for Jason, so a brother. He was a great friend, someone that, well, let's just get into it. So, thinking back about Jason, the first thing that I want to say is, for all the time that I've known him, I've called him Schulz. These gentlemen at the table over here, his other brothers, have called him Schulz. Not once in his entire experience did he want us to call him Schulz. He preferred to be called Jay. And so he would introduce himself. I would say, hey, this is my friend. And he would say, Jay, nice to meet you. And I'd say, no, that's Schultz. Don't worry about that. But I was trying to remember the first time that I met Jay. And it's impossible, because Jay just appeared in my life. And I think that's the mark of a great friend. He was just always there. I went to Missouri Southern and joined the fraternity, and we started having some gatherings, some get-togethers, and all of a sudden there was this guy. We knew him as Jay, Jason, Schultz, Schultzy, Monkey Boy, and a few dozen other names. But I was trying to remember exactly when we became friends, because that's a different point in your experience with someone. And I can remember a float trip. We call them KA canoe trips, original. We got to the bank of the river, and let me explain this. A bunch of guys from college, bunch of girls from college, and I had sat back and realized that the numbers for these canoes wasn't going to work out. There were not quite enough ladies for each guy to have one lady in his canoe. And I thought, well, boy, I better get myself aligned so that I can have a pretty lady in the front of the canoe, because that's the way it works, right? And Jay and I were sitting back on the bank, and he had kind of done those numbers himself, I think. And we were talking about, hey, do you know how to steer a canoe? Oh, I know how to steer a canoe. I grew up on the river. I grew up on the river. Great. We've got this taken care of. And lo and behold, when it all started working out, I was left alone with another guy. And it was not Jason. And I look over at him, impish grin. He's standing there. If you know Jason like I do, it was always fingers in the pockets, on one hip, just smiling out of the corner of his eye. But we proceeded to have a grand old time dunking people out of those canoes, crashing into each other, laughing, chasing snakes around, all that good stuff. So Jason and I, that's where we kind of started our friendship. Jason was a great friend. Let me tell you a story that I've been thinking about how to tell it, because it's a little bit college related. But I was out one night with another group of guys. Jason was home, probably studying or doing something important, but I was out drinking, having a good time. Met up with a group of ladies. Most of my stories are going to include ladies and drinking, so. Again, did the numbers. There's one extra lady. So who do we call? We call Jason. It didn't take long for him to jump out of bed or do whatever he was doing, drive that maroon Blazer over to the bar, and he got along very well with the extra lady. So I tell him, Jason, I'm doing well over here, buddy. I need some help. He said, no worries, I got you. He takes this extra lady and drives her around. They have dinner, they go ahead and have breakfast at that point. They have an entire evening in which he drives her back and takes care of her, treats her very well, all while distracting her while I was supposed to be doing other things with a friend of hers. I had struck out hours before that. Hours! And I didn't call him to tell him, hey buddy, I don't need you anymore. So the next morning he calls me and he says, how'd it go? And I said, hey buddy, how'd it go with you? He goes, I drove that lady around all night long. That's the kind of friend he was. He would drive that lady around all night long just so that you could enjoy yourselves. And many times he would step up like that. If I ever had a problem with a car, an electronic device, my kids, anything, Jay was the person that I would talk to. And he would call me about his things in life too. But there's one particular story that I know that the Schulz family wants me to tell. And it involves Jay being a great friend, and it kind of encapsulates everything that I loved about him, or love about him. I have a friend who's not in our fraternity. His name is Colt. And Colt had a specific birthday. I believe it was his 40th. John, is that right? So it was his 40th birthday. Colt is a unique individual, the man I've known since birth, essentially, and he is impossible to trick. I have tried my entire life to pull one over on him, and he just figures out a way to do it, to figure out what we're doing. So for his 40th birthday, a group of us got together and we decided that we were going to spend our time figuring out how to trick Colt. And many beers were involved, and we had lots of great ideas. And then out of the corner, Jason stepped up and said, I got an idea. Colt had been having these electrical problems with his truck. And Jay said, why don't I wire his truck so that every time he hits the brake, his horn will go off. And I'm telling you, the reaction you had in here just now was about tenfold out of about 10 of us, because it was genius. So I have to try to keep it brief. None of these stories are brief, but let me explain. So this day, we spent, the entire group of Colt's friends for months, we were telling him, we're going to be at this party. We're going to have this party on the lake. We had a houseboat, and the night before, Colt and I were going to spend the night on that houseboat. And then the day of his birthday, he and I were going to go play golf. There was some other friends. And then we were going to finish golf. We were going to go back on the lake, and we were going to party, have a great time, right? So one by one, over about a month before his birthday, all the friends started telling Colt, oh, I can't make it, for whatever reason. And it was just a cascade of things. And he was fine with that. Hey, it happens, right? The kicker was this gentleman over here, John Memnaugh, at the very end saying, hey, I can't make it the night before. And so Colt and I, sitting on this boat, he was right pissed. I mean, mad. So I said, hey, buddy, that's okay. We'll go play some golf. We'll do this. We'll have some good times, right? And then we'll go up and we'll hit the shoe show or whatever. And so we go play golf. Meanwhile, John and Jason are sneaking out into Colt's truck and hot wiring this bad boy so that every time Colt hits the horn or hits the brake, the horn will go off. Which was, again, genius. The second level of the genius, which Jay always had, there was always a second level, and you had to sometimes think, how did he think of that? That's why we kept him around, frankly. He had wired a switch to the passenger seat, which he knew I would be sitting in, so that I could turn it off just in case we got near a police officer or something. So John will tell you that Jason pulled the schematics for this truck. He had them, and he wired that sucker in like 10 minutes, and they were in and out like Mission Impossible. So Colt and I come back, and again, we played golf. We've had a good time, but he is fuming mad. We get in the truck, and I'm like, hey man, we'll have our good time. We're in Branson West, driving from the golf course to the lake, and lo and behold, we get just a little bit up the hill, and he hits the brake, and the horn starts going off. And I am not great at hiding my laughter, so I am staring out the side of the truck, hoping that he doesn't ask me what's going on. He kind of brushes it off. We go up. Of course, we have a stop sign that's got about 4 cars lined up, so he's blaring his horn at 4 cars. Oh, let me give you a picture too. This is a Ford F-250. It's a good-sized truck, so it's kind of intimidating for these little bitty cars in front of us. And again, every time they pull forward, wah, wah, and it's continuous. So, and he cannot figure out what's doing this. And again, electrical problems, he just got cleared up, so he's freaking out. He also uses this truck for work, just to add on all the complications. So we're doing that. And I'm laughing, trying not to. And by the way, I'm intermittently turning this off and on, because why not, right? Just to confuse him anymore. We pull out onto Highway 76, and guess what? There's a cop right in front of us. And we have at least a couple of stop lights before we will be able to get out from behind this cop. And I will tell you that we honked at that cop. And it was hilarious. And I kept turning it on and turning it off, turning it on, turning it off to make sure. Lo and behold, we get back. We've got a boat that we're going to take to the houseboat. He and I are riding along. Colt's mad. He's thinking about his truck, and he doesn't know what's going on. And we turn around the cove. We see the houseboat sitting there at anchor. And we pull up to it, and then all the yahoos who had told him that they weren't going to be there started appearing out of thin air. So Colt looks at me, I jump in the water, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole lot of effing you, and you're a jerk, and all the words that you say. Jay's standing there with beer, says, this big grin. And it's that moment when Colt's brain goes, something. He doesn't know exactly what's happened, but he knows that he's just been tricked and that Jay's involved. So probably that truck thing relates back to Jay. At which point Jay just went running off the front of the houseboat. He was chased by a 6'5", 260-pound man. But that encapsulates a couple of things. One other story that I do want to tell, because we were talking earlier that there are moments in your life where everything was before this moment and everything was after this moment, right? One of those moments, key for me, is Jason, his house became our de facto party house for a while. And there are many, many stories that I could tell about that house, or things that happened at that house. Most of them should probably not be told in polite company. But I went over there one day after school and was going to have some beers with Jason. And we were having a little get-together that night. And Jay was in the bedroom, which had these 2 French double doors in front of him. And he was sitting there at his desk, and he had a new computer. This was about 1998, okay? And Jay was always ahead of the curve for technology for us. He had the cool phone, he researched it, he figured it out, right? And I'm gonna leave you with this. That man turned to several of us and said, I just got a new computer. It has a 1 gigabyte hard drive. We can put all our music on this. And if you knew Jay, you knew he loved his music. And so we ran a cord all the way through that house to these speakers, and boy, did that house bump for a long time. And it didn't take long for us to exhaust that 1 gigabyte hard drive. Downloading from LimeWire and some of those other things that he knew all about. But that was Jay for us, for me. I can't go into all the things that make him so special to me, but he was always there. He was always someone to call. He always had a novel way of looking at things. And at the end of the day, it was his laugh that made him so special to me. He would laugh and tell me I was a fool, and then do the same things I did. And but I want to say thank you all for having me. It's an honor to be Jay's friend. It's an honor to be here with the family, and I hope that we get to hear a lot of great stories about him. Thank you.
We're going to hear a lot of stories regarding KA, because that was usually where we all met and hung out with Jason. I met Jason through an old girlfriend of his, Melanie Spalding. If anybody was around him in college, he and her dated on and off for a long time. But I've got a couple stories here just to kind of talk about what Jason was and how he was. So the first story is when he started being called Monkey Boy by the fraternity. Now, I come to find out, Michelle told me when we were at the hospital a while back, that he'd been called Monkey for years. Everybody always saw him climbing. He was climbing everything. Top of buildings, climbing trees, flipping upside down. But the kicker was, sitting at his house one night, watching a movie, I catch something out of the corner of my eye. I turn and look. Jason's eating a bowl of cereal, scratching his head with his right foot. Like, how the hell are you doing that? But, Monkey Boy. The next story involves a young lady. Jason bunches her out, having a few drinks, and Jason meets this young girl, hitting off. They're having a great conversation. They're really enjoying each other's company. Well, her friends decided they wanted to leave. He didn't want to end the conversation, wanted to continue, so he said, hey, where do you live? She says, well, I live in the girls' dorms back at Southern. Great. Which apartment? She says, you can't get in. It's after hours. Guys can't come in. Doesn't matter. Just tell me which one. I'm on the top floor. I don't care. Which one? So she tells him the apartment number. Her and her girlfriends leave. A little bit later, he goes home, grabs his rappelling gear, goes to Southern, scales the building, figures out where the room is, rappels down, knocks on the window. He hears her go to the door, open the door, no one there. Shuts the door, goes back to whatever she's doing. He knocks on the window again. She goes to the door, still nobody there, goes back to whatever. Finally, on the third knock, she decides to look outside. So he comes over, opens a curtain, and there's Jason. She just got out of the shower. Her towel's wrapped around her hair. Just Jason. But the last one, and Michelle, there's one thing you didn't include about Jason. Stubbornness. His love for his family, his friends, his brothers is something probably unequaled in this world. So, see if I can make through this one. Last year, many of our guys didn't know what Jason had been going through. Some of us closer to him knew. And a bunch of us decided we were going to celebrate his 50th birthday. So we took him down, went down to one of the casinos just across the border of Oklahoma, not Mexico. And and proceeded to have a wonderful night. Jason, leading up to it, didn't know if he'd be able to do it. The hotel worked great with us. They knew it may be a last-minute cancellation because he's really hoping to get into this new trial. Well, he got into the new trial. But he said, you know what? They just have to run some tests to start with. I can still make it up. We'll be good. So he comes in, flies in from Houston into Tulsa, drives over to the casino. We proceed to have a wonderful night celebrating Schulz. Bowling. Yeah, there's a bowling alley at a casino in Oklahoma. It's weird. Bowling, shooting pool, shuffleboard, you name it. We had a blast all night. The next morning, we go to breakfast, and we're talking. Jason goes, well, I need to be heading out in a little bit. I'm like, really? What's going on? He goes, well, I've got to head back down to the airport. I've got to fly back down. He didn't care what he was going through. He was going to make it up to hang out with his brothers, to see us, no matter what it took, no matter how much it pained him, he was going to be there. And to me, that is Schulz. It's one thing I've always remembered, his stubbornness, never letting anything get him down. If he says something, he's going to do it, and he's going to be there for you and be there with you. Thank you.
Else want to contribute?
Well, I gotta give this little story. I'm not as good at speakers as the other ones. Jared's still in here? There he is. So I gotta tell a little bit of a story about Jason. I lived in Joplin when he was up there in college, and I wasn't really part of the sorority guys. I kind of spent most of my time hanging out with Jared and Jason in their apartment. And Jared and I were sitting at the place where we probably should have been in class. And of course, Jason was either in class or over at the fraternity. I can't remember. If he was in the fraternity, I want to thank you for this. But Jason drove a 928 Porsche. Was that right, Jared? The little, was it 924? 924, thank you. I'm horrible. They're the Porsche experts, not me. So I was sitting on the couch. I think we were watching South Park, and it was just me and Jared jumps up and he gets a tape measure out. And then this apartment, I got to explain it to you. On the right-hand side, it had this sliding glass door. Jared gets up and he's like, grabs a tape measure. And I see him measuring this sliding glass door, and I'm like, what the hell is he doing? And all of a sudden, he kind of gets this grin on his face, and he said, hang on a second. He runs outside, and Jason's Porsche was sitting out there. And Jared comes in, he's like, I think it'll fit. I'm like, what do you mean it'll fit? So here Jared goes, starts taking this door apart, and I'm like, oh, I get it. So we spend some time, I'll make it brief, we pull this whole damn door apart, and then we go pushing his car into the living room. Then Jared, thank God, because he knew how to put things together, I didn't, puts the door back on. He's like, man, it's going to be great. Jason will be back here in just a little bit. Let's go hide. About that time, Jason comes pulling in. I thought, man, finally we're going to get one over on this guy. And I think we were hiding in the hallway or somewhere. We shut the lights off. And you hear the keys jingle. And the door opens, and all you just hear is, sweet, grabs a bag of potato chips, slides across the hood, turns the TV on, and I'm like, are you kidding me? We set this whole thing up for you just to lose your shit. And he just really deflated us, but it was just kind of goes to show you Jason's attitude for overcoming things. Something that was supposed to be just this great, we got you. He's like, nah, I'm going to take this back from him. And he slides across the hood like a stud. Just gets that TV on. That's my fondest memory of Jason. And of course, if it wasn't for Jared, I never would have got the damn door. He never would have got the door off. That's the one I got for you guys.
Thank you.
To see you all turn out this afternoon as a tribute to Jason. Very gratifying. I can't say it much. It's that, this is good family, good friends, good community. We are just blessed with all. Thank you, everybody, for coming this afternoon. And get together and fraternize. We got plenty of hope, food and drink back there for you. And go from there. Thanks again, everybody.
And Jack?
Sorry. And we're keeping the microphone on for anybody who wants to share. So, and there's another one here if anybody wants to walk around. So,
Michelle?
Yes.
Like John Menna, he just moved out of state.